This isn't just another celebrity scandal. This isn't just another Diddy downfall video. This is the moment a 25-year-old power alliance may finally be collapsing. And if the whispers are even partially true, the fallout could rewrite hip-hop history forever. 3 names, 1 shared understanding: power, protection, silence. Until now. Here's the version they wanted you to believe. Diddy, the untouchable mogul. Jay-Z, the blueprint billionaire. Beyonce, the flawless queen of perfection. 3 self-made legends, 3 separate journeys, occasionally crossing paths for unity, charity, and culture. That's the public story. That's what they sold us for decades. But insiders and longtime industry watchers have hinted for years that this wasn't just friendship. It was mutual insurance, a silent agreement that as long as everyone stayed winning, no one talked, no one crossed, no one exposed. And for over 20 years, it worked perfectly. Different brands, different images, but allegedly one shared understanding. You protect me, I protect you. You stay quiet about my world, I stay quiet about yours. That's how empires survive in this industry. Not through talent alone, through strategic silence, through calculated distance, through knowing exactly when to speak and when to disappear. And right now, the most powerful couple in music just chose to disappear. Let's talk facts, not feelings, because this isn't about conspiracy theories or wild speculation. This is about a documented pattern that spans literal decades. And when you actually lay out the timeline, the connections become impossible to ignore. Think about it. For over 25 years, these 3 names have moved through the same circles, attended the same events, shared the same stages, and built empires in the same industry. But here's what's interesting. Despite all that proximity, despite all that shared history, there's almost zero public conflict. Ever. No beef, no subliminal disses, no awkward interviews where someone had to address tension. Nothing. And in an industry where egos clash constantly, where competition breeds drama, where every slight becomes a headline, that kind of consistent peace isn't random. That's strategy. Let's break down what we actually know. Decades of overlapping social circles. We're talking about private parties, exclusive events, behind-the-scenes gatherings that the public never sees. These aren't just industry mixers. These are spaces where real power moves happen, where deals get made, where alliances get formed, where secrets get shared and kept. And all 3 of them have been regulars in these spaces for years. Then you've got shared industry events, award shows, charity galas, fashion weeks, album launches. Every major cultural moment in hip-hop and R&B over the past 2 decades, you can find photos and footage of these 3 in the same rooms, at the same tables, in the same VIP sections. Sometimes together, sometimes separately, but always aware of each other's presence. But here's where it gets interesting. Joint appearances at moments of cultural leverage. When Jay-Z needed to solidify his position as a mogul, Diddy was there, co-signing. When Diddy wanted to show he still had cultural relevance, the Carters would show up, giving him that stamp of approval. When Beyonce needed to prove she transcended just music, both men would publicly praise her genius. It was symbiotic. Everyone benefited, everyone stayed winning, and most importantly, everyone stayed protected. Now, let's talk about what didn't happen. Zero public conflict. Ever. Think about every other major figure in hip-hop. They've all had beef. They've all had public fallouts. They've all said something they regretted about someone else. But these 3? Nothing. Not a single moment where one of them threw shade at the other. Not a single interview where tension bubbled up. Not a single lyric that could be interpreted as a shot. And folks, that's not normal. That's not how this industry works. Unless there's an understanding. Unless there's a reason to maintain that perfect public harmony. When Diddy was questioned in the past about various controversies, various rumors, various allegations that have circulated over the years, no Carter commentary. They didn't defend him publicly, but they also didn't distance themselves. They just stayed silent, maintained that careful neutrality that doesn't create headlines. When Jay-Z faced his own scrutiny, his own controversies, his own moments where the public questioned his moves, no Diddy soundbites, no public statements, no commentary that could be used against anyone, just that same strategic silence. And here's what people don't understand about power at that level. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is control. When you're that famous, that influential, that watched, every word you say becomes a weapon. So the smartest move? Say nothing. Let the noise happen around you while you stay untouchable above it. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidental. This was mutual distance disguised as respect. And in power politics, in the game of maintaining influence and protecting legacies, that's textbook coalition behavior. That's how you survive decades in an industry that destroys most people within years. But now, everything is different, because one member of that alleged coalition is facing federal investigations, facing lawsuits with explosive allegations, facing a level of scrutiny that can't be ignored or managed with PR teams and strategic silence. And suddenly, that carefully maintained distance isn't enough anymore, because association isn't power anymore. It's liability, it's risk, it's potential contamination of carefully built brands worth billions. And that changes everything. When someone becomes radioactive, when their name becomes synonymous with scandal, when defending them could destroy everything you've built, that's when alliances break. That's when silence stops being strategy and starts being survival. That's when you see who was really loyal and who was just strategically aligned. Now, let's get into the deeper psychology of why this alliance existed in the first place. Because this wasn't just about friendship. This wasn't just about three successful people supporting each other. This was about survival. This was about building something bigger than individual careers. This was about creating a power structure that could withstand anything the industry threw at it. Think bigger than music. Think bigger than album sales and concert tours and endorsement deals. This was about control of narratives. This was about having the power to shape how the culture sees you, talks about you, remembers you. Let's break down what each person brought to this alleged arrangement. Jay-Z came in with the blueprint for turning rap credibility into legitimate business empire. We're talking about someone who went from Brooklyn streets to boardrooms, someone who transformed from rapper to mogul to billionaire, someone who proved you could maintain street credibility while building generational wealth. His lane was finance, ownership, tech investments, sports management, streaming platforms. He showed the culture that you don't have to choose between being respected in hip-hop and being respected in corporate America. You can have both. But that kind of dual existence requires protection, requires people who understand the game, requires allies who won't expose the contradictions that come with moving between those worlds.
Then you've got Beyonce, and let's be real, her lane was something nobody else could touch. Brand dominance, cultural perfection, the ability to control every single aspect of her image, her narrative, her legacy. We're talking about someone who turned herself into more than an artist. She became an institution, a symbol, a standard that everyone else gets measured against. Her power wasn't just in the music, it was in the mystique, in the carefully curated perfection that made her seem untouchable, flawless, beyond criticism. But maintaining that level of perfection, that requires an insane amount of control. Control over who's in your circle, control over what stories get told, control over what information reaches the public. And that kind of control is easier when you have powerful allies who understand the value of protecting each other's carefully constructed images. And then there's Diddy. His lane was different. His power came from access, from being the connector, from throwing the parties where everyone who mattered showed up, from creating the spaces where deals happened, where relationships formed, where secrets got shared. His influence wasn't just about his own success, it was about being the gatekeeper, about knowing everyone's business because everyone came through his world at some point. That's a different kind of power. That's the power of information, the power of access, the power of being able to open doors or keep them closed, depending on what served his interests. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Different lanes, no competition. That's the key to why this allegedly worked for so long. They weren't fighting over the same space. Jay-Z wasn't trying to throw better parties than Diddy. Diddy wasn't trying to build a business empire like Jay-Z. Beyonce wasn't trying to be the connector. Everyone had their role. Everyone had their territory. And as long as nobody crossed into someone else's lane, everyone could win. Everyone could thrive. Everyone could build their empire without stepping on each other's toes. But here's what people don't talk about. That kind of arrangement requires trust, requires knowing that the other person won't use what they know against you, requires believing that your secrets are safe, because exposing you would mean exposing themselves. It's mutually assured discretion. You know things about me that could damage my career, my marriage, my legacy. I know things about you that could do the same. So we both stay quiet. We both protect each other. We both maintain the public image of success and power and perfection, because the alternative is mutually assured destruction. And for over 2 decades, that arrangement allegedly held, through Jay-Z's various controversies, through rumors about his personal life, through questions about his business dealings, through everything. There was never a moment where Diddy said something that damaged him. Through Diddy's own controversies over the years, through allegations that have circulated in industry circles for a long time, through questions about his parties, his relationships, his business practices, there was never a moment where the Carters publicly added fuel to any of those fires. They maintained that strategic silence, that careful distance, that mutual protection. But now, one lane became radioactive. One member of this alleged power structure is facing scrutiny that can't be managed with PR teams and strategic silence. Federal investigations don't care about your influence. Lawsuits with detailed allegations don't go away because you're powerful. And suddenly, association isn't an asset anymore. It's a liability. It's a risk that could contaminate everything you've built. It's a threat to brands worth billions, to legacies carefully constructed over decades, to images that have been protected at all costs. And when that happens, when someone in your circle becomes that kind of risk, that's when you see what the relationship really was. Was it genuine loyalty, or was it strategic alliance? Was it friendship, or was it mutual protection that only worked as long as everyone stayed winning? Because right now, it's looking a lot like the second option. Here's the part that fans don't want to confront, the part that makes this whole situation feel different than just another celebrity scandal. Because this isn't just about business, this isn't just about strategic alliances falling apart, this is about what happens when you've known someone for 25 years, when you've shared rooms, shared wins, shared secrets, when you've been photographed together at weddings, at parties, at private moments that the public rarely sees, when you've allegedly had each other's backs through every storm, every controversy, every moment when the world was watching and judging. And then, when their world explodes, when everything they built starts crumbling, when allegations surface that could destroy everything, you don't even release a neutral statement. You don't offer even the most carefully worded, legally safe expression of concern. You just disappear. You go silent. You distance yourself so quickly, so completely, that it makes people wonder if you knew something was coming, if you saw the warning signs that nobody else saw, if you quietly moved your assets, your reputation, your brand away from the blast radius before the explosion happened. That doesn't feel like ignorance. That doesn't feel like being caught off guard. That feels like preparation. That feels like someone who already knew the fire was coming and quietly, carefully, strategically moved everything valuable out of reach first. And if that's true, if that's really what happened, then what does that say about the nature of the relationship? What does that say about loyalty at that level of power and influence? Because here's the thing about real friendship, about genuine loyalty. When someone you truly care about is going through hell, even if you can't publicly defend them, even if you have to protect yourself and your own interests, there's usually some private gesture, some way of showing that you still see them as human, not just as a liability, some acknowledgement that this is a person you shared history with, not just a business associate who became inconvenient. But when there's nothing, when there's just cold, calculated silence and aggressive legal action to distance yourself from any association, that tells a different story. That tells a story about relationships that were always transactional, always strategic, always contingent on everyone staying winning, staying powerful, staying useful to each other. And the moment that equation changes, the moment someone becomes more liability than asset, those relationships evaporate like they never existed. And maybe that's just how it works at that level. Maybe genuine friendship is impossible when everyone has too much to lose. Maybe trust is impossible when everyone knows too much about each other. Maybe loyalty is a luxury that billionaires can't afford because the cost of being associated with the wrong person at the wrong time is just too high. But it still hits different. It still feels like a betrayal, even if it's a rational, understandable, strategically necessary betrayal. Because we watched these people present themselves as family, as a united front, as people who had each other's backs no matter what. And now we're watching that image dissolve in real time. We're watching the truth emerge that maybe it was never really family. Maybe it was just business. Maybe it was just a carefully maintained alliance that worked perfectly until it didn't. Until one person's problems became too big, too public, too dangerous to everyone else's carefully protected empires. And when that happens, when someone in your circle becomes that kind of risk, that's when you see what the relationship really was. Was it genuine loyalty, or was it strategic alliance? Was it friendship, or was it mutual protection that only worked as long as everyone stayed winning? Because right now it's looking a lot like the second option. Then it happens. The moment everything changes. The moment that carefully maintained equilibrium shatters. Names start appearing in lawsuits, not just as background context, not just as peripheral figures, but as people allegedly present at specific events, specific locations, specific moments that are now being described in legal documents with disturbing detail. Rumors start circling online, not just gossip blog speculation, but coordinated waves of allegations, testimonies, stories from people who claim they were there, who claim they saw things, who claim they've been silent for years because of NDAs, because of fear, because of the power these people wielded. Commentary spirals out of control across social media platforms, videos dissecting every connection, threads connecting decades of dots, old photos being re-examined, old interviews being analyzed for hidden meanings, the internet doing what it does best, turning into a collective investigation machine that doesn't stop, doesn't sleep, doesn't forget. And what do Jay-Z and Beyonce do in response to all of this? What's their move when their names start appearing adjacent to one of the biggest scandals in the music industry? Do they release a statement expressing concern? Do they offer thoughts and prayers? Do they acknowledge the gravity of what's being alleged? No, none of that. Instead, what we see is something very different, something that tells a very specific story about how power operates when it feels threatened. No loyalty posts, no public support, no emotional distancing statements, no "we're shocked and saddened" type of responses that would create space between them and the allegations while still acknowledging the situation. Just nothing. Radio silence on the personal front.
But on the legal front, that's where things get very active, very aggressive, very strategic. Cease-and-desist letters start flying. Legal teams mobilize. Threats of defamation lawsuits get issued to anyone who tries to connect them too directly to the allegations. Rapid narrative shutdown across every platform. Videos get taken down, posts get deleted, accounts get threatened. The message is clear. Don't say our names in connection with this. Don't even imply association. Don't suggest we knew anything, saw anything, or had any involvement in anything being alleged. And if you do, we have the legal firepower and financial resources to make your life very difficult. This isn't panic. This isn't scrambling. This isn't the response of people who are caught off guard and don't know what to do. This is containment. This is a well-coordinated, professionally executed strategy to control the narrative, limit the damage, and create as much legal and public distance as possible from a situation that's spiraling beyond anyone's control.
And here's what's fascinating about watching this unfold: the speed of it, the precision of it, the way every move seems calculated to achieve a specific goal. When you're that powerful, when you have that much to protect, you don't leave things to chance. You have teams, you have strategies, you have contingency plans for every possible scenario. And one of those scenarios is apparently, what do we do if someone in our circle becomes radioactive? And the answer, based on what we're seeing, is surgical reputation defense. You cut ties quickly. You establish distance publicly. You make it clear through every legal and PR channel available that you are separate. You are uninvolved. You are not to be associated with whatever is happening. You protect the brand at all costs. You protect the empire at all costs. You protect the carefully constructed image that's worth billions at all costs. But here's what that aggressive legal response also reveals. It reveals fear. Because if there was truly nothing to worry about, if the connection was so distant and meaningless that it couldn't possibly affect them, would they need to respond this aggressively? Would they need to threaten legal action against anyone who even mentions their names in the same sentence as the allegations? Or does that level of aggressive response suggest that they know how bad this could look? That they understand how easily association can become implication in the court of public opinion? That they recognize that their carefully maintained image of perfection and power could be damaged just by proximity to this situation, regardless of whether they had any actual involvement in anything being alleged? Think about it. When you're truly innocent, when you truly have nothing to hide, the usual response is either silence, because you're so far removed it doesn't even register as your problem, or a simple statement clarifying your lack of involvement. But when you're aggressively trying to shut down any conversation that connects you to a situation, when you're sending legal threats to control the narrative, when you're working overtime to establish distance, that suggests you understand exactly how damaging this association could be. That suggests you know there are questions that could be asked, connections that could be made, dots that could be connected in ways that wouldn't be good for your brand, your business, your legacy. And so you do everything in your power to make sure those questions don't get asked, those connections don't get made, those dots don't get connected. You use every tool available to powerful people, money, lawyers, influence, fear, to control the story before it controls you. And watching this happen in real time, watching this level of strategic reputation management deployed so quickly and so aggressively, it tells us something important. It tells us that at this level of fame and power, relationships aren't what they appear to be. They're not about loyalty or genuine connection. They're about strategic value. And the moment someone loses that value, the moment they become a threat instead of an asset, those relationships dissolve instantly. No hesitation, no sentimentality, just cold, calculated self-preservation. Because that's how you stay on top. That's how you protect what you've built. That's how you ensure that someone else's downfall doesn't become your downfall too. Now, let's talk about why everything is surfacing now. Why, after decades of rumors, whispers, and speculation, this is the moment when everything is exploding into public view. Because timing matters, context matters. Understanding why people who stayed silent for years are suddenly speaking up tells us something important about how power operates and how power structures eventually crumble. Power structures change. That's the first thing to understand. The people who controlled the industry 10 years ago, 20 years ago, don't have the same level of control today. New platforms emerged. Social media gave people direct access to audiences without needing traditional gatekeepers. The old model, where a few powerful people could control what information reached the public, what stories got told, what allegations got buried, that model doesn't work anymore. Not completely. Not when anyone with a phone can record something, post it, and have it reach millions of people before any PR team can react. Because people who were once scared are no longer dependent. That's huge. Think about how power maintains itself through fear, through control of resources, through the ability to make or break careers. If you're an aspiring artist, an industry professional, someone trying to build a career in music, you don't cross the most powerful people in the industry. You don't speak up about what you saw, what you experienced, what you know, because doing so means career suicide, means getting blacklisted, means never working in this industry again. But what happens when those people are no longer aspiring, when they've already built their careers or decided to leave the industry entirely, when they no longer need the approval or access that kept them silent? Suddenly, the cost-benefit analysis changes. Suddenly, speaking up doesn't cost them everything anymore. NDAs expire. That's a practical reality people don't think about enough. Non-disclosure agreements have time limits. Legal settlements that required silence have end dates. And when those dates pass, people are free to speak, free to tell their stories, free to reveal what they were legally prevented from revealing before. And some of those NDAs, some of those settlements from incidents that happened years ago, decades ago, are expiring now, right now, creating a wave of people who are suddenly legally free to talk about things they've been forced to keep secret. Protection disappears when influence fades. When someone is at the peak of their power, they have the resources to keep people quiet. Legal teams, financial settlements, the implicit threat of what they could do to your career, your reputation, your life if you speak up. But when that power starts to crack, when federal investigations start, when the protective shield of influence starts to weaken, people start to feel safer speaking up. They start to believe that maybe, just maybe, they won't be destroyed for telling their truth. And because the internet doesn't forget, it waits. Every photo ever taken, every event ever documented, every interview ever recorded, it's all still out there, archived, searchable, available for anyone who wants to dig through it. And people are digging. Online investigators, amateur detectives, people with too much time and too much curiosity are going through decades of material, looking for connections, looking for patterns, looking for evidence that supports or contradicts the allegations. Old clips are being resurfaced, old photos are being re-examined, old statements are being analyzed for new meaning in light of current revelations. The internet is building a collective archive of everything, and that archive becomes evidence in the court of public opinion. This is why everything feels different now, why this moment feels like a genuine reckoning, rather than just another scandal that will blow over. Because all of these factors are converging at once. The power structures that kept people silent are weakening. The people who were dependent on those power structures are finding independence. The legal agreements that enforced silence are expiring. And the internet is creating a permanent searchable record of everything that makes it much harder for powerful people to control narratives the way they once could. This isn't just about one person's allegations. This is about a systemic shift in how power operates, how secrets get kept, and how long the powerful can maintain control when everything is changing around them.
This isn't about one man. This isn't about one scandal. This isn't even really about the specific allegations being made right now. This is about something much bigger, much more fundamental, much more important for understanding how power operated in the music industry for decades. This is about how power protected power, how influence shielded influence, how the most successful people in the industry created informal systems of mutual protection that allowed behavior to continue unchecked, questions to remain unasked, and accountability to be perpetually delayed. About how silence became currency, how keeping secrets, how not asking questions, how looking the other way became more valuable than talent, than integrity, than doing the right thing. If you wanted access, if you wanted opportunities, if you wanted to succeed in this industry, you learned quickly what you were allowed to talk about and what you needed to pretend you never saw. About how image mattered more than truth, how protecting the brand, maintaining the mystique, preserving the carefully constructed public persona became more important than addressing uncomfortable realities. How entire teams of people, lawyers, PR professionals, managers, handlers, were employed full-time just to make sure the public version of someone's life never intersected with the actual reality of their behavior. And for a long time, that worked. For decades, that system functioned exactly as designed. The powerful stayed powerful. Those successful stayed successful. The image stayed pristine. And anyone who threatened to disrupt that system found themselves removed from the industry entirely. But now, the rules are breaking. The old systems of control are failing. The traditional gatekeepers are losing their power to determine what information reaches the public. Victims are filing lawsuits. People who were silenced are speaking up. Old stories are resurfacing with new context, and untouchable names suddenly don't look so untouchable anymore. This is a cultural reckoning. This is the moment when decades of protected behavior enabled behavior that everyone in the industry knew about but nobody talked about publicly, is finally being exposed to sunlight. And that sunlight is revealing just how rotten some of these systems were. How many people knew? How many people participated? How many people benefited? How many people stayed silent because speaking up would cost them everything? And the implications of this go far beyond entertainment, because what we're watching happen in the music industry is a microcosm of how power operates everywhere, in every industry, in every institution, in every space where some people have significantly more power than others. The same patterns emerge, the same protective systems develop, the same culture of silence takes root, and eventually, if enough pressure builds, if enough people speak up, if enough cracks appear in the facade, those systems start to collapse. We're watching that collapse happen in real time, and it's going to change everything. Here is the terrifying part, the part that should keep everyone involved awake at night. If this goes criminal, if federal investigations lead to charges, if testimonies start happening under oath, if people start naming names to protect themselves or to seek justice, silence won't save anyone. Because the question won't be, did you do something? The question will be, what did you see and choose to ignore? And that question destroys legacies faster than any conviction ever could. Because you can claim ignorance, you can claim you didn't know, but when there's documentation of you being present, of you being in the room, of you being at the events where things allegedly happened, that claim becomes much harder to maintain. When there are photos, videos, witness testimonies placing you in proximity to behavior that's now being criminally investigated, suddenly, "I didn't know" sounds a lot like "I chose not to know." And in the court of public opinion, that distinction doesn't matter. You knew, or you should have known, or you deliberately avoided knowing so you could maintain plausible deniability, and none of those options look good. None of those options protect your legacy. None of those options allow you to maintain the image of perfection and power and moral superiority that you've spent decades building. We are not at the end of this story. We are at the calm before the next explosion. More lawsuits, more insiders talking, more alliances quietly breaking. And if history has taught us anything, when the most powerful people stop speaking, it's because they know what's coming next. Drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for updates, because the next name might shock everyone. This changes everything.